Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the 4x4 Virtual Salon. Today, we're going to be discussing staying ahead of the threat actors' cybersecurity in the AI age. And we have four fantastic speakers with us here to discuss this topic. But before I introduce you to our four speakers, I just want to quickly say thank you to our sponsors, Stapleton. So Stapleton works with wealth managers and asset managers, helping them to provide semi-liquid, systematic index-based products to their clients and allowing those clients to invest in some of the largest and most liquid private companies like SpaceX and Anthropic. For information about Stapleton, please visit stapleton.com. Right, so today is 4x4. So to anybody who's new to the 4x4, it is called a 4x4 because we cover four topics. We have four speakers. We cover four polls, so please, we'll launch those in a second, so please take part in those polls. And then last of all, we'll take at least four questions if they come in, right? So please don't be shy. If you have a question for any of our speakers, please submit it, and I shall put it to the speakers as your question comes in. So, right, over to our four speakers. So I'm going to introduce them left to right on my screen. I don't know if that's the same for the people watching this, but I'm going to start with Filip Stojkovski, who is the director of SecOps and AI strategy at BlinkOps. And BlinkOps is an agentic platform purposely built to accelerate security operations at scale. Next, we have Eamonn Maguire. Eamonn is the director of engineering, machine learning, and AI at Proton. And Proton, also based here in Geneva, massive AI company, massive security company, which works with enterprises and individuals and provides them with a suite of security enhancing solutions. Next, we have Robin Brattel. Robin is the CEO of Lab One, and Lab One works with financial institutions, helping them to understand their exposed data. And then last but not least, we have Sonal Rattan, who is the CTO of eXate. And eXate does a lot of things. It's quite difficult to define succinctly, but I think you describe it as operating at the intersection of data classification, data privacy, and data sovereignty, also working with very large enterprises. Right, okay, so over to the first of our four topics today. We're going to be discussing the blind spots in modern cyber defense. And Filip, I'm going to come to you first with a question. What are the most dangerous cyber blind spots that you still see in large organizations, even though they might be throwing money at their cybersecurity defenses?
That's a pretty good one, and I would say one of my favorite one lately to discuss. When it comes to blind spots, I usually like to compare it to the era of the cloud adaptation, because I think the AI tool adaptation nowadays, it's one of the main blind spots that we are creating as well. So if you're going like 10 years back, and we see that everyone rushed back then to implement everything in the cloud, they wanted to use SaaS software and so on, but security come a bit later. It became like the byproduct, and later we started to catch up, implement all the guardrails that we needed. And I think now it's happening the same thing with the AI. Organizations, they want their employees to use AI because they think it will enable them, it will make them do more stuff faster, better. But the issue is with enabling all the employees to do all these AI tools, we are creating what we call shadow AI, which is, it has been known for many years as shadow IT, and it's not, I wouldn't say it's a separate category, it's more just subcategory of the shadow IT, because the AI tools is not just, okay, someone is creating an account, you have data loss, leakages that are happening, so you don't know if employees what type of data they're uploading there. And the second part is when it comes to connecting all those tools and connecting them to agents, you need to take care where they can connect to, what specific rights they can connect to your infrastructure. So yes, I would say the AI adaptation is probably the biggest blind spot that we are creating nowadays.
Robin, would you agree with that? And I suppose, with your kind of exposed data hat on, um, what do you think companies are consistently missing or underestimating when it comes to their kind of surface attack area?
Well, obviously, I look at this with the angle of an exposed data or an exposed data angle because we analyze the breach and ransomware data sets that get published by the threat actors in the public domain. Uh, and I do think it's a huge blind spot for most organizations. I mean, there's a lot of services that look at credential dumps or credit card data, but I don't believe there's anyone other than Lab One that look at the actual contents of files that appear in the public domain. And just to sort of give you some metrics to help frame what I'm about to say, we've processed about 290 million files at this point, and about 220 terabytes of data over the last couple of years. That's been dumped by criminals in the public domain. I mean, this year alone, we've seen Crunchbase, Iron Mountain, KPMG, and a number of others have issues. And sometimes these incidents get reported as, say, a big company like KPMG or Iron Mountain, but in actual fact, when you dig in to the incident, you'll find that it's come from one of their close third-party suppliers, but they're the most exposed in the data set. I'll give you a couple of examples because I think it's helpful. I mean, this year alone, global financial services customer of ours felt that they weren't exposed by an incident impacting a financial management platform. And it was quite a small incident. It was only 1,000 files. That's really small compared to what we see. I mean, recently we did an incident that was 2.7 million files and 2 terabytes. So this is small, 8 gig, 1,000 files, but we extracted 5 million key terms from it, and that impacts 37,500 companies in the blast radius of that. And the financial services customer of ours, when they first saw this incident, didn't believe they would have any exposure. When we said that they did have exposure, they didn't think they were a third party. They assumed they were a fourth party. And then they started to think, well, maybe our staff have signed up for something here, or there's some link between our staff and this organization. It turned out that it was systems within the organization that had got system access to this financial management platform. And that actually created very serious exposure for the financial services customer. It was a complete blind spot.
What do you mean when you say system access?
Those systems were accessing the financial management platform. So that's sys access, basically, credentials, accessing systems completely in the blind. So the financial services customer didn't realize this link existed in the threat team and the vendor team. They just didn't think they had a relationship with this third party. So that's the blind spot. I mean, there are other blind spots. Another global tier one financial services institution 1 week found 4 critical incidents as a result of Lab One's analysis of incidents in the public domain. They said they were all critical, so and they wouldn't have known about them again without this analysis. So in terms of the blind spots, I mean, we see impact in fraud, physical security, actual security, commercial risk, brand risk, VVIP risk, regulatory risk, and IP risk. And then you get all the different attack vectors as a result of the data sets that are out there, from the things we're all familiar with: phishing, smishing, business email compromise, deep fake. If you're
Robin,
leaking
I'm just going to stop there because
I'll stop there. But
because I want to ask Eamonn. This is going to get worse, isn't it, Eamonn? I mean, how is this not going to get exponentially worse? Robin was talking there about sort of system accessing, system access being growing. So this is going to get exponentially worse, isn't it?
Sure. I mean, one part of it is you've got, say, RAG pipelines, co-pilots, agents, for example, running on people's networks. You basically, if an adversary doesn't need to compromise your model, anymore, or even your system. They can basically do it via, for example, if you have to do a web search, you do a web search, you can hit any particular web page which contain instructions. Those instructions can be executed by the model. And from that, you end up exposing a pile of your systems to any, basically you can extract emails or documents, or any internal information can be exfiltrated without the user ever having to, the attacker ever having to actually gain access to your systems directly, which is quite incredible. And I think
so we're sort of you're saying we're almost inviting the attackers in a way.
Yeah, I mean, people are, it's the classic, talked before, but it's the classic hype cycle thing. People are scared of missing out, so they're willing to plug whatever they want into the system to make it work, for fear that someone else is going to overtake them. The reality is that these models are going to give them probably small increases in productivity, but at the same time, they will increase their risk of data loss exponentially, at least. And it's not only that, right? There's model supply chain attacks are another thing, which is a big issue. So people are, organizations are adopting open weight models, but they don't really have a proper security review process, which is what they would have had for example, third-party software. So as Filip was saying before, the shadow IT or shadow AI is something which is happening. It's something which is happening which you don't know is happening necessarily within your company. So people can use Claude, or they can use whatever to send out data, or to connect to their internal systems, to act on their behalf, to call browsers, to call the terminal. But you basically also have these models that are being deployed internally by companies that can act on triggers. The same way as you had, for example, command and control type infrastructure for malware that would trigger a particular action on the ransomware, or on malware running on a person's infrastructure. Now this can be triggered by a particular prompt. And then all of a sudden you've got models injecting malicious code, or actually performing malicious actions directly on their systems. And people are totally blind to this risk because they're scared of missing out.
Yeah. So I guess one of the things that you would say is, be very careful what data you, or what data you give access to when you open up to AI agents and LLMs and so on. So do you think data governance is at the heart of this question?
It's a part of it. Yeah, it's definitely a part of it, but it's, we're talking about AI threats at the moment. We've not even managed to just do manual threats at the moment. Yeah, we're still struggling with some of that. So it's all, this is just more stuff that we're going to have to deal with. So having policies for internal actors, that's never worked. We know that. If we look at what happened with Tesla, there was 2 disgruntled employees. Next thing you know, Elon Musk's social security numbers on the web. That sort of stuff, because breaches happen because people still do bad stuff. But data governance, it seems to just be put policies in, or think you're doing the right thing. But realistically, we should be being a lot more proactive and actually doing proper data protection, looking at actually making sure that at the source we've got good protection in place. They're right now everything is done on the perimeter, and you think you're safe. The perimeter is so easy to break now, and I think policies are just not going to cut it anymore. So governance, yes, but when we're talking to organizations, they'll be saying things like, well, we just don't know where half of our data is, and how do we actually do all of we get those sort of questions. So they don't know what their threat points actually even are. But that's why organizations like us exist, right? Is that we're actually trying to help get to that point where we're able to help them find where their information is, and then start putting the governance in place, and putting the access control in place, and then putting data protection in place. But right now, it's still quite difficult to get organizations to still want to do the right thing when this threat is just only increasing right now.
I know you guys can't see it, but the poll data is in for this question. And Robin, this will please you, right? People perceive the biggest blind spot to be exposed data. Yay. But the second biggest blind spot is considered to be that we don't know what our biggest blind spot is, which is kind of what you were saying there, right, Sonal, which is people don't even necessarily know.
No, they don't. But my view on this is that no one should be comfortable. We should be doing as much as we can to deal with these things right now.
So, right, we're going to move on to the second topic. So there have no questions so far, so we'll just invite people again. Don't be shy. I will take the questions. I will always give priority to the audience questions over my questions. But we're going to move into section 2 here, which is AI versus encryption. Who has the upper hand? And obviously, encryption is a big part of what many of you do, right? So, particularly Proton, right? So I'm going to come to you first. Can AI, and I guess further down the line, quantum computing, significantly accelerate the breaking of existing encryption methods? You're muted, Eamonn. Sorry.
The short answer is no. Not
No.
directly for well-implemented symmetric and asymmetric cryptography today. But the threat model is shifting, of course, right? So a classic AI/ML doesn't threaten AES 256 or RSA in any fundamental sense, but like brute force optimization doesn't change the underlying like computational hardness of the system. However, like AI is used in say side channel attacks, which are more interesting, in fact. So for problems where you cannot write the key directly, the option is to go to side channel. So you can use ML, for example, to extract key material from power consumption traces, electromagnetic emissions on the GPUs or CPUs to understand how the decryption process is working actually to extract out what the actual keys are, or like timing variations as well. And you could do this probably with far less data than what you needed with like classical methods. So this was the thing that you could always do, but now you can accelerate that somewhat with some things that you have within AI. I mean, for post-quantum cryptography, I mean, there's already quite some things in place. So NSA's migration to CNSA 2.0, for example, or NIST post-quantum cryptography standards, which is FIPS 203, 204, 205. So those ones were finalized in 2024. They've got very good safeguards in place for what happens like after the fact. The problem is that most organizations aren't really implementing those yet, and they need to, because if the longer it takes you to do it, for example, by the time post-quantum cryptography comes along, a lot of state actors or other actors are basically just harvesting data, right? So they're harvesting data so that they'll be able to decrypt it later on. So it doesn't necessarily mean that whatever's exposed now is going to be like decrypted, but in the future it could be, and that could cause quite a lot of problems. The other part of it, I think, which is maybe even more interesting, is that there's people that don't really implement cryptography well. Many companies don't. For example, there's many companies that don't fully understand what end-to-end encryption is, and they will sell end-to-end encrypted software, but actually it's not end-to-end encrypted at all, right? So I think AI also accelerates the discovery of implementation vulnerabilities, like fuzzing and code analysis and protocol analysis are much faster with modern tooling, like AI and ML tooling, meaning that weaknesses in how your encryption is deployed will be found faster than before. But fundamentally, the mathematics of encryption will not be broken by AI itself.
Is that so, Filip? I can see you nodding quite a long way, quite a lot when Eamonn was talking there. But I thought that I thought encryption really was under threat from AI and quantum computing. I thought that was almost like Eamonn had almost like a contrarian standpoint there. What do you think, Filip? Is encryption under threat? Are sort of cryptographic standards going to be easier to overcome than in the past?
Yeah, I think I'll agree here with Eamonn. And I think when it comes to encryption, it's more of a math problem, and it's not something that AI is great at doing.
Would you say maths problem? You said
yes.
Yeah.
So that means yes, it's not. I don't think so. It's so good at that it will break encryption, or it's actually necessarily the threat. It's higher there. But I would go on the other side. It's how AI can help us here is more, as Eamonn was saying, identifying how we can better implement or identify if we have bad implementation of the encryption. And AI is really good at doing summaries, in other words. So it can go, if we feed the right data, it goes through our environment, it sees how our configuration looks like, it can point out all those issues and tell us this is how you can fix it. This is what you can implement here to have stronger encryption. So yes, in other words, it's more of our assistant that can point out the issue and yes, help us implement it better, or point out the issue where it's not implemented well and we might have some additional risks. In other words, it will generate some alerts that we will need to handle later. But I think there's a lot of buzz around this, and it's more of a because it sounds a lot of science fiction. A lot of people, they relate AI with I would say complete autonomous robotic actions that they can go and do, like quantum computer powers, which is a bit different than what AI does nowadays and what is available to the public.
We've had our first question here, which actually requires some encryption itself, right? Because I'm not totally sure what see if you can understand what this question says. So it says, isn't it undue if the government asks or the court requires to decrypt and amass it? Is it voluminous and undue? What I think what they're getting at is like, if are we going to get to a stage where, like, governments may like, or there may be court orders, right, to decrypt information. How hard would that be? I guess it's in a way, it's you would answer in a similar fashion, right? Which is, it's not going to get significantly easier in the short term.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think, yeah, we are not there, and AI is not the solution to that.
Sonal,
if you do cryptography correctly, for example, you don't need to do this. You won't be able to break it because you don't have access to the keys. Whereas many companies, when they say, for example, they've encrypted data, they keep the keys in the same infrastructure, right? So it doesn't make any sense at all. So when you implement how you store the keys correctly, and you basically secure the keys with the user's passwords and so on, which is what we do, we have no way of accessing the key, so we can't decrypt the data. So one thing is, like, a company comes along and says we've encrypted all of our data on our servers, but then they store the key on some volume somewhere, then this is totally useless, right? So it comes down again to how you implement it.
So I'd like you to comment on this too, because obviously encryption is a key part of what you do. Encryption at rest, encryption in use, and so on. So this would be good news to you then, that encryption is not like immediately threatened by these new these breakthroughs in AI.
Yeah, but it depends on what encryption you're using. So for us, we're big fans of tokenization and using other techniques at field level as well, because we are seeing an increase in harvesting of data right now that's traveling through for this, like, post-quantum threat. That's like, I think they're looking at in the next 5 years that we're going to definitely need to at least address, like, credit card information and how that's being transferred. But it is everything that's traveling through the network, where it's using, like, asymmetric keys. So you've got a public-private key. So that side is, it's a problem today because people are still harvesting that data. So for us, we look at additional things. I was watching, I was quite interested in one of the fireside chats that was in Kuala Lumpur. They had the PKI and quantum conference, and certain things that we were hearing were, well, we might have to start using symmetric encryption before we start transferring data across, because that now this is it may become an insecure channel. So actually using double encryption on it. But so we know from an AI standpoint, it's not going to be a main issue at the moment. But there would, like, be different, like, ways to be able to, like, go around it to try and find that information and be able to find the keys, exactly as mentioned before. There are going to be ways around it. It's just how secure are you going to be with that? So for us, we offer this as a service, as eXate, to make sure that we're doing best practices when making sure it's on different network. But we actually do a fragmentation part as well, which is something that we've been hearing from, like, NIST as well, where potentially fragmenting ciphertext, so you're not having everything in one place. That we're seeing new different things in place, but organizations are waiting for the industry to solve this as a problem. They're not doing it themselves, and that Eamonn was mentioning that people are not implementing the techniques that are being prescribed by NIST or whatever. But at the conference, everyone was saying the same thing. We're waiting for the industry to fix the MTLS problem, which is the encryption that when you're sending data over the network, they're waiting for that to be fixed at an industry level. So right now, what measures should we be taking? What additional steps could we be doing to protect that data? Because the threat's there now.
Yep. Robin, I haven't asked you a question in this section yet. So my question to you is, so earlier on you talked about all the different ways in which companies, well, not more likely that, if in your case, right, their supply chain is leaking information. Do you have any statistics on, what's the biggest source of those leaks? Is encryption a big factor?
Well, I mean, as I don't, I don't want to repeat what's already been said 3 times, but I can. Eamonn said almost exactly what I was going to say on this subject, which is mathematically, encryption's great. I mean, it's very, very hard to crack it. On the trade mission that I think I mentioned before, there's a new PQC or post quantum cryptography startup, and spun out of Leeds University with even better math that makes quantum encryption. So I don't think that's the problem, the encryption technology. I think the problem is the deployment, the implementations of it, the use of AI to find flaws in the implementation and ways in around the sides. I try and think of good analogies for this, but I haven't come up with one yet. But I mean, the trying to if the letter's in the postal system, let's assume it's secure through the postal system. The way to try and read the letter is not in the postal system, it's when someone's writing it or when it's received. And then how it's either stored at the beginning or the end is probably how people try to crack the encryption model, not in transit. I don't think people encrypt data at rest very well. I think that's more complicated, especially if you're a large enterprise. And therefore, if I can get into those servers, then I can extract the data. And obviously, we're seeing just huge data sets unencrypted in the public domain. So I think that's probably the main risk with encryption technology. And I mean, quantum's still not very stable. Qubits like to just change state randomly at the moment. They haven't controlled that yet. So I think there's a little while before quantum's really at a place where it can break this current encryption technology. But that's not to say I don't agree with what's being said about the data being harvested and stored for a time when they can decrypt it. And of course, if government, going to the question to answer that, my view on that is if governments ask organizations that encrypt technology to create a backdoor or some way of decrypting for them, then that's the backdoor, and that becomes the way that the criminals will try and target the decryption. It's a terrible thing to do, but I understand why governments want to do it, because if you can't see what's flowing through messaging channels, how can you run successful intelligence units? And it's intelligence units that keep us all safe from criminal activity. So it's a real problem. I understand that, but I think encryption, I think that should give the public some assurance when governments are asking for a key to decrypt the messages. It just shows you how encrypted they actually are. The government can't decrypt them currently.
Good. Right, we're going to move on to topic 3, which is incident response in the age of AI speed attacks. And Robin, you're on a roll, so I'm going to put the next question to you as well. When attacks unfold at machine speed, what parts of the incident responses can be automated and what parts still need to be done by humans or need to be human-led?
Well, I mean, this is a really deep technical question, and I'm not deep enough technically. And I'm going to caveat my answer by saying I'm not a forensic incident response specialist. I've met them, and they're serious individuals. And I've got investors in our company who are building automated breach response technology, and I've met startups, well, scale-ups really, that are doing this extremely well. So I think you have to try and stop incidents at machine speed. There's no way human beings can do it. Although, again, I had this kind of assumption. I don't know about the other panelists, but I had an assumption that every log in a log file was being checked. And I recently found out that there's so many logs in big companies that only 1 in 10,000 logs is being checked. And this is to do with data volume. And it means that state actors, and I learned this from a very credible source when I was in Washington, D.C. How about that? And only 1 in 10,000 logs being checked. It means that state actors and threat actors can exist in the system for a long time without anyone actually knowing they're there, because the calls, the PCAP data that goes in the log file, every 1 in 10,000, once every year, they might just send a little quick ping out, and you can easily miss it. This was actually another mathematical founded startup that has a compression algorithm that can compress the PCAP data down to, I think it was something unbelievable, like 70,000 to 1, which means that they can actually now spot these calls out in the PCAP. So that's one problem, right? I mean, if you're dealing with such a huge volume of data flowing through the pipes that you can't actually see the troubling threat actor traffic or state actor traffic, then it's even hard to operate at machine speed to detect that and close it down. So I think, yes, you've got to operate at machine speed on that side. Obviously, from our side, once that incident's happened and maybe the data has been exfiltrated, then you definitely can't use human beings to try and analyze a terabyte of data and work out what your risk is. You definitely need AI to do that job for you. And that's where, again, we feel we can step in. But in terms of human beings, there's a lot of important decisions that need to be made when the incident is happening. So you want to try and get the machines to close the thing down. You've got to get all of your infrastructure closed down, probably, as we saw with, say, Co-op and Marks and Spencers. Just Co-op, they unplugged themselves from the internet. It's huge damage to the organization for a short period of time, but that was a human decision, and it probably saved them. And then they've got to find their way to get back up and running again, and that's the complicated thing. If the criminals are in the backups and have been for some time, then it can be very hard to shake them out and find out what's gone on, and that's when you need to analyze huge volumes of log information. So I'll hand the floor over. That's about as far as I can go on.
No,
on
that was
response.
that was great. So I don't know who to come to next. I think maybe Filip will come to you next, right? And just maybe ask. I mean, because this is ways like I mean, I don't know how much you're dealing with sort of remediation and incident response and so on, but just from what you're seeing in your business, how much earlier do you think incidents could be detected if organizations were more aware of their kind of exposed data footprint?
That's a good one. Actually, for incident response, I've been working in incident response for 15 years, so it's one
okay.
of
So
the
it
areas
is your field. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, definitely. As far as like how it goes, how earlier it can be, I think there are two moving pieces here. So first is how earlier you can detect it. It depends, as what Robin was mentioning, what you're actually monitoring. I think we arrived to the point now that we have a lot of telemetry, we have a lot of data, we can monitor a lot of it, but then now we don't have the human power to process all of that. And that's where AI comes to play. So we can now, all that data that we were gathering all these years and we're saying we don't have enough analysts to process it, now we can process it at machine speed. But then it generates I would say, the second bottleneck, which means we need to respond to it. And for when it comes to incident response and you need to go to respond, to remediate, you don't want AI going and like blocking all the laptops in your company because it thinks there's a threat, and that's the safest action to do. You need a human to approve the action and to guide the AI to the right course of remediation and response. So going back to how earlier, I think, yes, we can, because we can process more data, we can definitely now monitor more stuff, so we can detect them earlier. And as I was saying earlier, AI is really good at making all those summaries, so it can alert us now in a couple of minutes and tell us this is where the problem is. It's something that here as well at BlinkOps, something that we do a lot and we try to improve is like how fast you can detect these specific threats. So yes, we can detect them way earlier, reducing the time from what was previously like hours. Now we can reduce it to minutes. But now the idea is like how fast we can remediate those. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we're having today, on where to put the human in the loop, when it makes sense, the AI to go and remediate things on itself. And then the next thing is how we reduce the noise, because there's another thing that we usually create when it comes to detection. So we have all this data and we need to create these rules that will show and point that something is malicious, which means that we need to find a way that we need to fine tune them well enough, because then it's generating too much cost. You cannot just throw unlimited AI at all your logs and skyrocket your costs at the end of the day.
Correct. Thank you so much. So I didn't realize this was your absolute field of excellence. So that was great. It was so now over to you, because I mean, how much does eXate deal with incident response? And is there is there danger in trying to respond too quickly? I mean, can that lead to mistakes?
The pace that, especially now looking at how quickly you can get your organization can get infiltrated with AI going, yeah, there's a lot of new techniques out there, and a lot of code can be generated very quickly. So I don't think you really have a choice to slow down. I think you've got to, that the bullet's been shot and you've got to try and outrun it, is really the best way I can describe it. Is and every organization is going to be there, and mistakes are going to be made, and that's what I guess state actors and all anyone that's trying to actually access that information from you is hoping that you do make a mistake. But it's very, very cheap for them to put large scale attacks on you. It's like, I think it was the last one I saw was at $18, and it took some attack from some code that was generated by MIT. It took, I think it was under an hour. They were already into the system. They had a 7-hour window, less than an hour. They were in and had access to all of their underlying systems. It's very, very scary how quickly this is becoming a problem. So for us, in terms of incident response, we're like almost like a proactive mechanism to be able to. You've got other tools that deal with things reactively. The only part that we help with on an incident response perspective is if there is a bleed, that we can go into crisis mode and we can stop data going out, and only have really specific operations that to be allowed to actually access that data. And that's, they call it a crisis manifest. This is like where organizations can actually say, well, we've got this bleed. I don't want to take everything, like as Robin was mentioning, completely having to actually come off the internet. This is now being really very, very controlled. But a lot of organizations don't have that in place. The ones that we are working with are actually starting to think about this in terms of, okay, if we are under attack and we don't know where it's coming from, do we want to completely take ourselves off, or do we want certain operations to still continue, and then we can just monitor those to start with, and then we can start reducing other places where data is actually getting leaked out from, and to sort of almost see where that leak's coming from. But the attack surface has just become so large and so quick. I just don't see how you can slow down in this space right now.
Eamonn, over to you. So thank you so much. Eamonn, over to you. So basically, what everybody's saying, there's a lot of sort of consensus on this question too, which is the surface area is getting larger, the speed of attacks is increasing, a lot of response is kind of quite crude, right? Sort of coming off the internet. Are organizations structurally prepared for the world in which we're heading into?
I don't think many of them are. I think like traditional incident response playbooks are built around sort of mental models of discrete sort of, say, more human-paced attacks, where you've got very identifiable stages like the kill chain and what they do. But AI-driven attacks basically can compress or collapse those stages. So like an autonomous agent can move laterally, exfiltrate, cover tracks much faster than you'll have a SOC analyst be able to triage the queue, right? The playbook assumes that you have time to deliberate and look at stuff properly, but AI attacks don't really necessarily grant that. Also, I think more fundamentally, like a lot of IR playbooks sort of assume a human adversary with motivation that you can model, whether that be insider threat or external threat. So autonomous AI agents don't necessarily have an intent in the traditional sense. They have an objective function that they're trying to optimize for, which makes behavioral analysis much harder because it's not as predictable as what you would have got from necessarily a human. So your CM rules were written for human attack patterns, not machine patterns, even though the machine patterns are typically learned also off human attack patterns, right? So, but they can generalize also based on that. And then there's also, I think Robin also alluded to that, there's the organizational design problem. So like your CISO, your legal communications teams still operate largely in siloed escalation chains, which are optimized for we have a few days before this is public or something. But you know, when you have got AI, ML, whatever, accelerated breaches, they can become public maybe within minutes or hours, right? It takes them much less time. You can just have a pipeline which is sending them out. So like the organizations that tend to be more ahead are those that have moved towards continuous validation, where they look at like breach and attack simulation, not necessarily just using their pen test once a year to tick a box. They've really invested in proper detection engineering, and they've also got multi-layered defenses for this. And I think also maybe what we define as being an incident these days is also going to change, right? Because you know there are certain things now which are performed, which have historically been performed by humans, which are now being performed by perhaps agents. So whereas maybe people with really bad code quality, for example, would be a HR issue, or if they messed up a legal contract and ends up costing the company millions, or if they leak data, that would be a HR issue from before. Now it's not necessarily, it's an incident response issue from the security team, because people start having these agents perform these tasks more autonomously than they've ever done before. Well, we've never had it before in such a scale.
So I know you can't see this, but the poll. So we asked people how confident do you feel your organization could respond effectively to an incident, and the most people have responded we're somewhat confident, but we rely heavily on humans. So I guess based on what you just said, they shouldn't feel somewhat confident because an over reliance on humans is probably not going to mean they can effectively respond. Is that right?
Did I continue in that? I wasn't
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. Just one because
Okay.
yeah, you've got the mic, so to speak. Yeah,
I wasn't sure because before I jumped in by
yeah.
accident. So I was, yeah, that's true. I mean, people are generally overconfident anyway, on their ability to do anything. So that's no surprise that that happens. But yeah, people should be less confident, I think, and more paranoid about what's
Yeah.
coming up, and that's typically a good way to behave as a security, as a security person or a security engineer, or detection engineer. But also the governance aspect, which Sonal came to before. I mean, this is super important because people don't know their exposure. So, you know, it's easy if you've got like a closed room and you can control every exit of your data and the people coming in and out. But when you've opened up your system to say third parties, say I open up my system to ChatGPT. ChatGPT does a web search. How does it do a web search? It does it with some third party API. How does it call this other system, for example, to do some other check? So there's all these third parties which are connected, to which companies have no idea where their data is going. And they may say that you can remove PII and stuff from these queries, but there is no guarantee whatsoever that your identifiable information is not inside those queries. The third parties to whom you have no idea. Yeah.
We're going to move on to the fourth and final topic, which is around cybersecurity as a strategic advantage, not just a cost. And Sonal, the first question is to you, right? So what does it actually take to move cybersecurity from a cost center or what is perceived to be a cost center, maybe, to a board level strategic priority? And just to follow up on what Eamonn said, are people paranoid enough?
No, they're not. That's again this overconfidence part of it. It's shocking that cybersecurity is not already a part of the board. Yeah, we're in a completely different age at the moment, and it's just how quickly do organizations understand that and start reacting to it is what we're just watching and seeing to the point that it's not even when we're looking at a board level, even internally within organizations, it's so fragmented, especially with the large organizations that we're speaking to. It's very fragmented on who owns what. And there's autonomy to do different things. There's the autonomy to have like their own mistakes. You're giving all of this to your teams and saying, go faster, do more, use AI, potentially causing even more issues. But if no one's managing that and governing it at the board level, I'd be a little bit worried that these decisions have been made. It could be brilliant and it could cause additional pain as well. It should be managed and governed already, so it should be a strategic imperative, right? It should be there, but it's a shame it's not. It is because it's something that's probably one of the largest threats. It's not just coming from like actors, it is coming from like governments. You're seeing so many different things, so many places where you're getting attacked, and it's so cheap to attack as well on top of it. How can it not be something that is getting funded? So, like for example, we spoke to one of the biggest banks in the world, and they would not give budget for their API security program just to do so additional because they were saying we've got other priorities that we need to think about.
Yeah.
But if it was at the board level, you'd at least expect budgets to be assigned properly to this because that overconfidence is there. No, it's fine. We're already doing these things for it. They had a breach. It's just we're seeing it already.
Just because I'm just asking this quickly because when we're in the green room, we're talking about hey, AI seems to be hoovering up a lot of like entry level jobs. Like is one I agree that we should be more paranoid, and the threat is the threats are growing all the time. But is one positive upside that will create more employment for cybersecurity professionals?
There aren't enough people.
Yeah.
There just aren't enough cybersecurity professionals. Sorry to cut in.
If any parent is watching this worried about their child graduating from university or whatever, not having a job, maybe they should study some sort of like cybersecurity degree, right? Okay, that's good.
But I have one point to add there, which I found interesting. Again, it's slightly away from it, but Imperial College, so the university, has now consolidated the computer science and maths divisions into one faculty. Which basically means that they're expecting less jobs in the computer science market. So where it was two, they're now combining it because, again, that overconfidence in what AI is going to do, which means you're going to get less and less people go into cybersecurity. We've got the opposite problem right now. The signals that are being sent out academically are still not, they're saying what the jobs are going to get automated by AI anyway. So why would you want to do that as a job? Where that's not, it shouldn't be the right attitude towards it.
It's a bit more nuanced, right? I mean, you wrote people should study cybersecurity or farming, right? So we'll let you elaborate on that in a second. But to talk a bit more about Proton, right? And because I think you guys have defined yourself by being a privacy first security company, and like how do you how do you take that differentiator into this world of AI? What is like Proton doing in terms of helping your organizations to safely move into this world of like using LLMs and so on? So maybe you could slightly elaborate on that and how you can kind of like privacy first meets this desire to to use open AI and LLMs and these things.
So our approach is more about data minimization, right? So the principle is that if you go for local processing, minimal data retention, federated approaches, end-to-end encryption, you shrink the breach surface, right? So you can't leak what you don't hold. So if someone came into Proton and there's an attacker got into Proton, they wouldn't get anything useful, right? Because everything is encrypted, which is the way it should be. It wouldn't be great for Proton because it would look kind of bad if someone got into our systems, but they would not be able to get anything out of it. And I mean, most companies are under pressure to be able to utilize the data that they get from people. So they're looking to either monetize it, they're looking for advertising, they're looking for analytics to understand customer behavior that maybe they either sell to some third party or they keep it for themselves to optimize their processes. But for us, we don't have any of that. So I think for us, it's privacy first it's not just a value statement that we put on the marketing pages for the website. It's a security architecture choice that makes your risk profile genuinely better, right? You can credibly communicate to sophisticated enterprise buyers and regulators. We don't have any of that information because this is how our entire security architecture is focused. And yeah, I think the trust dynamic is probably shifting a bit because users are well, I think they're becoming more sophisticated, maybe after years of like high profile breaches and the emergence of maybe AI products that are visibly consuming their data. Also, you have people like Sam Altman, for example, who basically tell people don't put any of your sensitive information into ChatGPT, but people do it anyway, which is kind of the foundational reason for why we created Lumo, which is what I work on.
So what is Lumo? Just sorry, I don't want to give allow yourself to give too much of a plug, but what is Lumo? Just since people may not know.
It's basically it's Proton's answer to an AI assistant like ChatGPT or Claude, but your data is your data. We have no idea of what you're doing on the platform. You can use it for sensitive queries without having to worry about your data turning up somewhere or being used against you in future for like political office or something like that. So basically, it's the same about what we do for Mail. The same rationale for why we did Proton Mail is this AI is coming into the forefront. The attack surface for everyone is basically AI tools. Instead of putting all their data into Google searches before, now they're starting to converse with AI over which products to buy or what's wrong with their bowels, for example. All these things are now going into a different system than what they were going into before, which is largely Google search. So as that threat surface has emerged for in terms of the privacy in particular, not just in security, it sort of brought the need to build something like Lumo to put the data back in users' control.
Fantastic. Filip, question for you. So you're working with a lot of CISOs. How did they go about, I suppose, elevating the strategic importance of what they do, getting a big budget? To what extent is it possible to build bigger budgets just based on the sense of like, unknown unknowns or because it's like, a lot of what they do is sort of try to prevent what may not happen. And, so what are the secrets in terms of sort of, building or getting more budget and sort of raising the profile of the cybersecurity team?
I think for at least with the CISOs that I've worked with, I think the key is that you transform the risk into dollar amount. So that means that you want to show the risk that you have, how much they would cost the company if they're not remediated or handled. And I think there are two types of risks where CISO they're handling. The ones that they're reduced, so you have some sort of controls around them. You have monitoring, you have detections, you have people that they monitor the infrastructure and so on. And then you have the assumed risk, which is on the other side, where it's stuff that you cannot do, and you just assume that you will leave them as that. And yes, if the worst happens, then the executives, they need to be fine with the fines or the amount that will come with the specific breach that will occur. But yeah, I'm seeing more and more, especially from the CISO when they're coming and they're looking at our products. One of the key areas that they're asking is like how we can turn all these incident response metrics into dollar amount. I want to show to my executive that yes, we are handling threats faster, but how that looks like in the long run, how much risk we're reducing now. And the more risk that they're reducing, they can ask for more budget. Or on the other side, the more accurate it's their, I would say, assumed risk metrics, which in many cases is assumed. So you say, I have 10% of my environment that I'm not monitoring, and that costs 10 million in fines if something happens there. They might get 1 million investment just to cover that part. And I think that's the best route to go with and get some extra budget.
Fantastic. Okay, Robin, final thoughts from you on this topic, because, in your case, I think it's fair to say that you sort of are creating a new category within cybersecurity. And, how do you go about getting the attention of CISOs? What's your biggest sort of argument? Is it about trust? Is it about, once trust is lost forever? What do you find works in terms of, raising the profile of what you do on the agenda of organizations?
Well, I think for us, it's because we've analyzed 288 million or 290 million files, we can sort of turn up and show them how they're exposed. Often they don't know, which tends to grab attention fairly quickly.
Sure.
I think for all the CISOs I've met, they have my full support and sympathy. All organizations are under siege, is the way I think boards should consider this. I mean, if you think about your house and the burglars were just sat outside constantly waiting for you to go out or waiting for you to not close a window, you would have a different approach to security. You'd either not leave anything valuable inside the house, or to be absolutely 100% sure that you'd locked everything tight and put bars up. And well, I mean, you can imagine yourself. That, I believe, that's pretty much the reality for all CISO security teams and organizations today, especially the large ones, is that they're permanently under attack. And all the time within the organization. And I also have the view that unless you are in farming, Eamonn, you're pretty much running digital businesses these days, which run on the flow of data. I mean, even farming's being taken over by OT and IoT, right?
Yes.
I mean, they've got drones and automated things. I mean, imagine in 20 years if your farms run automatically and then someone hacks it, they could destroy all the crops. And when we talk about this problem, the security problem, a lot of people, I think, naturally think about it as people interfacing within the company, computers, laptops, and stuff like that. They're not actually thinking about operational technology, SCADA systems, IoT devices, and so on at the perimeter. And the Mandian managing director recently spoke at an event and talked about the fact that a large proportion of incidents these days are caused by IoT or devices at the edge. And so if you consider that house metaphor and your house is permanently under attack, if you keep building sheds and structures in the garden that are loosely umbilically connected to the main property, but you're not securing them very well, I mean, you put a new camera system in, you connect it to the internet, and its login is admin and password because IoT devices ship without sophisticated encryption. Well, you're just creating a window into the company, and that's how they'll get in. So I can't speak on behalf of boards. I think a lot of boards are taking it seriously. What I can do is plug something. So I'll plug this book. I didn't write it, but one of my brilliant advisors, Andy Brown, did. He's on the board of Zscaler, a massive security company. He was the former global CTO at UBS. You can buy it. It says it's $25 on the back. And it's 7 steps for board directors. And it's a step through guide for directors on how they should be taking security and cybersecurity much more seriously. And I do think they need to think it's intimidating. Everyone's out there, they're trying to attack all the time. Final thoughts are, if you do suffer an incident, I've seen multiple times now, there's a direct relationship between an incident and the valuation of a company. You can see it on the stock market. There's loads of research on this. So if your stock price goes down and your trustworthiness goes down, you'll probably have customer attrition. If you have customer attrition, then your customer acquisition and retention is going to suffer. and that's going to hit the bottom line. If it hits the bottom line, you're going to see valuation depreciation, maybe trust in the brand goes down. And if you suffered sustained issues, M&S, Co-op, Land Rover, then what's that done to your brand value globally?
Yeah.
What's that done to your trust globally? What's that done to the valuation of the business globally? The impact's going to be probably far greater than the recovery costs, which in the case of JLR were 500 million and M&S were 300 million. What's the actual impact of the bottom line long term for those things? So I just think you've got to take it more seriously. There's got to be much more investment, and security teams need a lot of support because they're dealing with an extremely complex problem. And going right back to something Sonal said right at the beginning, you've got inside actors working against you, which is the hardest thing of all. And it's
Great.
either a mistake or intentional. They could just be out to harm you deliberately. So very, very challenging topic for sure.
Thank you very much. So we need to wrap there because we're out of time, sadly. We didn't have many questions, I think, which reflects the fact that this is a complex subject. And so we were very grateful to have 4 real experts with us today. I certainly have learned a lot, and I think some of my misconceptions are being corrected. I think we've clearly identified that this is a growing threat and people should be more paranoid, but maybe we finished with at least one optimistic note that we'll need more cybersecurity professionals. So thank you everybody for joining. Thank you for plugging Andy Brown's book. Maybe Andy Brown will come on one of our 4x4s in future. And thank you to our speakers. Thanks so much for giving up the time and sharing your expertise with our listeners and viewers. Thank you very much.